Hello, everyone. I'm Extra Cheesy 87, and this is Let's Play Reflections for Danganronpa. So, first few things I want to get out of the way before we get into the meat of the video, which is actually talking about Danganronpa itself. I will probably have to record this video in multiple sittings, just because without getting into TMI territory, essentially I've got a bit of a medical issue that makes sitting or standing for an extended period of time kind of painful, which is why I haven't recorded anything in like almost a week, so my voice is probably not uh still kind of working it out a little bit after not having talked very much for the last little bit. Think that's it. Also, the length of this video, I don't exactly know how long it's gonna be. I'm aiming to keep it under 40 minutes. I don't have a script for these type of videos, but I do have bullet points, and it is the longest list of bullet points I've compiled for one of these videos, even longer than the video on the Trails in the Sky trilogy, and that video was like an hour long, or over an hour long, like hour and 20 minutes or something. I don't think it'll take that long, but essentially we're gonna kind of talk about case by case, my thoughts on each one, and then we'll probably end things off with some character power rankings and some final thoughts. So, also the background footage it's Hades. I don't think it's actually enough footage for the entire video because despite that being my first time playing the game in like 3 months, it was a very, very quick run. I don't really want to record another one for background footage, so we might just turn into a black screen for the last like 10 to 15 minutes of the video. Depends on how long it's going to end up being. But let's go ahead and jump in. So, first things first, just kind of want to talk about how I learned about Danganronpa. I learned about Danganronpa a very long time ago, actually. I first heard it mentioned in old Retsupre videos. If you've ever heard of that channel with Slow Beef and Diabetes, I think they like moderated there was like a Danganronpa thread on the Something Awful forums, and they would talk about moderating that thread and how like the fans of the series or the game, I guess it was just the one at the time, were like freaking rabid. Now I never really looked into the series after that, but I was familiar with the name. And I would hear about them, and I kind of like knew tangentially that they were visual novels, but I didn't really start to look into them until I played Zero Escape. The Zero Escape trilogy, maybe 3 years ago is when I first played it, maybe a little bit longer. After I finished playing through the Zero Escape trilogy, played them all back to back, I kind of like thought I still wanted read some more like kind of similarly themed visual novels, but after getting about 90 minutes into the first Danganronpa, I liked it, but I was just so burnt out. Because, I mean, like, between the 3 Zero Escapes, that's, like, almost 100 hours. Well, I think 999's, like, 20, Virtue's Last Reward's probably about 30 to 40, and Zero Time Dilemma is... We don't talk about Zero Time Dilemma. I've purged that game from my memory. It's not even really that bad. It was just a letdown after Virtue's Last Reward, which was very good. So, after playing it, it was, like, on the list of potential Let's Play stuff. I kind of wanted to do it after I finished Let's Playing the Zero Escape games, but honestly, I don't know if I'm ever going to play Zero Time Dilemma, just because I don't know if there's a point. Game's not that good, and I've already played it, so you don't even really have, like, the blind angle of the Let's Play, so I don't know if I'm ever actually going to end up doing that, and I decided to do Danganronpa instead, because it being blind would be a little bit more interesting. So going into it, I actually had... I don't know how I would define my expectations going into Danganronpa. They were probably a little bit higher than the average person who went in completely blind, just because I've always heard about these games in comparison to Zero Escape, and I really, really like the first 2 Zero Escape games. I mean, Virtue's Last Reward's like one of my all-time favorite visual novels, and 999's pretty good as well. So I had pretty high expectations going in, or moderately high. And really the game, I think, lives up to them, especially like at the start. Like case 1, despite being the very first case, which is in some regards, you could consider that might be the weakest one because you're still kind of setting up characters and you still got to do a lot of like beginning exposition. I thought case number one did things really well. Like it managed to have a couple interesting twists, like with Sayaka, both the twist that she was the aggressor in the murder and that she was planning on framing Makoto. Like I thought those were interesting. The Leon number puzzle, I think obviously I was a little, well, at the time I didn't really consider that puzzle was uh, definitely more challenging in the original Japanese version. I didn't really think that through, so I think I was probably a little harsh on it being a little too easy. Um, but I still think it's definitely neat. And honestly, I think the only reason I figured it out so fast is because there's a similar puzzle in Virtue's Last Reward. So I was kind of already prepped to be on the lookout for that type of stuff. Like I was already familiar with that style of puzzle of having numbers written backwards that look like words, or like words written backwards that look like numbers. Um, so overall, I do really like that first case. I think it does a really good job of setting the tone. Even though the Leon stuff is a little obvious for an English audience, there was still some doubt in my mind about whether or not like the Leon thing was going to be a smoking bullet. So it was still interesting, even though the killer was a little obvious at that point. And plus, there was also the angle of like, what if Sayaka's like trying to frame Leon as she dies or something? You know, that's one thing that I do think the game as a whole does a good job of, is even in the situations where like the killer, you're not 100% confident. There's always the chance that maybe the game's being a little crafty, which is one of the things I did like about case number 2. I think we're gonna move on into it now. With the whole Byakuya tampering with the body to make it seem like Toko was the killer, or Genocide Jack. I can't really remember. I don't think, did he know that Toko was Genocide Jack, or did he just know that Genocide Jack was among us? I can't really remember the exact specifics, but I kind of thought that was a little interesting, just because even though, like, because, obviously Toko, who they kind of set up to be the killer, is not going to be the killer, because in all of these cases, the very first suspect is never the first, or is never actually the suspect at the end. Like case number 1, you spend the first like 30 minutes trying to prove that Makoto didn't kill Sayaka, which, I mean, I wouldn't say, it's not obvious that he didn't kill Sayaka, but obviously to the player audience, it's obvious because, the game's from Makoto's perspective. And the thing with Toko being Genocide Jack, I feel like they played their hand a little too, like, it was too obvious when they come out, like when you talk to Toko that one time and she has that line about trying to keep Genocide Jack in or something. I can't really remember. But it makes it very clear that, she's got like a split personality or something, or it's a very easy assumption to make. So the bit at the start of chapter 2 with like Toko, you kind of already know that you can disregard that. And so I was on to Togami, like the idea that he was knew about Genocide Jack and was trying to frame it like that. And I did enjoy that they kind of did like a double twist where it was actually Togami was being, if you really think about it, he's being a dumbass by like trying to implicate, because really he's implicating himself. Because I think the explanation is that like he knew Mondo was the killer, and that if we started to suspect him, he was gonna be like, haha, actually, Mondo was the killer. Totally believe me, guys. Even though it could have easily just been like, well, he's just trying to weasel his way out of this. We've got all this evidence, like, let's just go ahead and kill Togami, and then everybody dies. Like, that would probably be what would happen most of the time. So Byakuya's whole, like, I'm gonna tamper with the body because it'll be more spicy and interesting, and then I'm gonna brain flex on everyone at the end and reveal Mondo was the killer. Like, what if nobody believed him? Like, and then he would have just gotten himself killed, because he's kind of a dumbass. I do like Togami, but he's a bit of a dumbass at times. I do think case number 2 did the best job at hiding the killer, just because of the Togami deception, right? Like, Toko's not going to be it. You can rule her out. So then you move on to the next angle, which it's Togami's the most suspicious, and then it ended up being Mondo, and I wasn't even really completely sure Mondo was the killer until it was actually like definitive, because there was some plausible deniability there where just because Mondo knew about Chihiro's like I don't really know how to phrase it, like true gender. I don't really like that phrasing, but like because really one of the things I kind of like had in my head was that when returning from the sauna, maybe Mondo and Taka saw Chihiro in there for like, exercising at night, and that's how they figured out. And like, so that's how Mondo would know that information without necessarily being the killer. But ultimately, they do end up just making Mondo the killer because honestly, I think the trial was like going on for a long time at that point. And if you did like a triple twist where it's like, actually, it's not Mondo, it's someone else, it would get a little old. So I understand why they went with that, even though I kind of would have liked to see or I could have seen, not necessarily I would have liked to, but I could have seen them actually going even further with that. But like overall, case 2, it definitely does the best job at hiding the killer in my mind. And plus, one of the things I didn't notice that I was told about after the fact is that Mondo actually has some dialogue that implicates him in the free time events, where you can kind of have some hints in the way he starts to refer to Chihiro differently after a certain point in chapter 2, which I thought was pretty neat. Trying to remember, I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to mention about case 2 that I don't have it written down, but I feel like there's something I forgot. I don't know. Oh yeah, I think I kind of already mentioned this, but just the whole like how the first 30 minutes are kind of pointless. It's not. I wouldn't even say it's pointless because it is important to establish that Toko's Genocide Jack. But I do wish they hadn't made it so obvious that Toko was Genocide Jack, because like that reveal had no real impact to it, just because it felt so like they were so clear about it prior to that. So I think moving on to chapter 3. Honestly, I don't think it's the best case, but I think it's my favorite. Simply just because I'm really proud of figuring out the killer like almost as early as you could possibly do it. You could definitely figure it out maybe a little bit early, like in the moment. Like Celeste is, she's acting very sus with the whole like the way she's directing the entire sequence of events. But during the moment, I'm more focused on like, reading all the dialogue and everything. I'm not really stopping to think things through. So it wasn't until like when you talk to Sakura and she kind of lays everything back out again that I noticed that Celeste was basically the one driving all the action. And the biggest thing is that the Robo Justice that she kept claiming to have seen would always mysteriously disappear as soon as everyone else showed up. So I do like how they kind of give you all the puzzle pieces. And I think most of the trials are actually pretty good about this, of you can figure out the killer before the actual trial. Which is good and bad. On one hand, it's good because it feels like it gives a lot of autonomy to the audience or the player, where it does feel like you can actually do some like real logical detective work. But at the same time, sometimes when you do kind of have a very strong idea of who did the thing, then the trials themselves, you're just kind of waiting for them to like get to the point. Because like case number 3, it kind of has the same thing where there's like the red herring with Hiro at the start, where like obviously as the audience, Hiro's not the killer because it would be too obvious. So you can already rule him out, but you still have to spend like 30 minutes proving that Hiro couldn't have been the killer, which is like a little boring. But even though I knew Celeste, or I had like a very, very good idea that Celeste was the killer, I did like how case number 3, even though like I knew the end goal, there were like a few different theories as to how she could have how the murders like laid out. And so it was still kind of fun to theorize exactly how the murders were taking place, even if I already knew that it was, Celeste was the one who killed at least Hifumi, right? The only big problem with case number 3 is that Hifumi choosing to be an accomplice actually makes no logical sense whatsoever. Like, it just makes his character is such a dumbass in chapter 3. To a degree, I will say Hifumi is the best character for this because it is kind of established that he's easy to manipulate earlier on, and that it seems like Celeste in particular has like a bit of power over him with the way she's able to boss him around in that dining hall scene with like the tea or whatever. But like, I don't know why Hifumi would agree to, because like, even if, let's say, Celeste didn't murder Hifumi, like, what's the end goal there? Okay, so Hifumi has killed Taka. It goes to trial. Celeste has no... Like, if Celeste doesn't say anything, then she dies. Why would she let herself be killed so Hifumi could potentially escape? It doesn't really make sense. I guess partially it's that he's also, like, really, really angry at Taka because he feels like he's stolen alter ego, so he's not thinking straight. But it does feel like the whole case hinges on Hifumi just actually being the dumbest character ever, and that's a bit of a fault. Like, to a degree, obviously, characters are never going to act 100% logically in any story ever, because if characters are always 100% logical and do the smartest thing, then nothing interesting will happen. Like, basically, the game would just end after chapter 1 started. They'd just be like, maybe we shouldn't kill each other. I mean, there's no guarantee that even if we win, we won't just be murdered as soon as we leave. So let's just get along, guys. Like, that would be the end of the game if everyone acted logically. So I understand that occasionally people have to be a little dumb. Another kind of criticism, it's not even really a criticism of chapter 3, but like one of the things that I would have liked to have seen differently is I didn't really like Taka being killed off. Like, it felt like he was mid-character arc, where you had that whole thing with like him becoming friends with Mondo, and then he he falls into that depression after Mondo is revealed to be the killer in chapter 2. And then he kind of like bounces back. And then it kind of feels like they're about to complete his character arc or do something more interesting with him. And then he just dies. And they don't really ever do anything. Like, I feel like they spent a lot of time developing Taka just for him to like just kind of die. Which is like, you could argue that that's thematic, right? And so I wouldn't consider it like a flaw per se. It's just something I would have liked to seen a little bit differently. Just because I feel like Taka was set up to be a pretty interesting character, and he could have, like, they could have done more with him, I guess. Like, I would have rather have seen that character development put into someone like Hiro or Toko, who are alive the entire game and don't get as much development, at least in terms of just the story themselves. Obviously, all my perceptions of the characters are based on having done only a limited number of the free time events. Because honestly, most of the characters we hung out with instantly died. Makoto was just like essentially a kiss of death. If you ever started talking to Makoto, your days were numbered. Like, our very first free time events, we hung out with Sayaka twice and Junko once. They instantly died. Then we hung out with Hina in chapter 2. And then Chihiro. Chihiro instantly died. And then in chapter 3, I don't think we hung out. I think we just hung out with Kyoko, yeah, because that's when I was like scared. I was like, well, Kyoko's probably not going to die anytime soon, so we're just going to hang out with her. I feel reasonably sure she won't be dying anytime soon. And then there was someone else. Oh yeah, I was going to hang out with Sakura, I think right when chapter 4 started. And part of the reason why I didn't want to do it was because I was worried that if we hung out with her, she was going to die, which actually ended up happening. Which was kind of funny. So, like, overall, like, my experience with the free time events were a little bit more limited, just due to kind of investing time into characters who instantly died. It was not, like, a huge deal as a whole, but I kind of forgot what I was talking about. I don't know. I kind of wish they would have done more with him, or transferred the time spent into building up his character into someone else who actually stayed alive the entire time. The case 4... overall, I still think case 4 is good. I have a moderate and a minor problem with it. The moderate problem is I feel like the case is a little bit misleading, just because while I kind of considered the suicide angle, I dismissed it because it doesn't feel like that should have procced a murder investigation or like a clash trial at all, because there's no blackened. Like, why have this? I can't really remember exactly how the regulations are phrased, but even if they do say anytime a body is found, a class trial will begin, that's not entirely true because there was no class trial when Junko, aka Mukuro, is killed at the start of the game. Like, really, we should have just had a class trial instantly and convicted Monokuma, and then we would have won. I mean, obviously, that's not really how it works, but like, I was because of that scene, I was like, well, it can't actually be a suicide because there's no killer. Like, I kind of assumed it would only ever have trials when there was a ambiguous killer. So I felt like that was a little misleading. The other minor issue is Hina sabotaging the trial. The only real reason I have beef with it, it's a little bit more understandable once it's revealed that she read a fake suicide note from Sakura. But it still feels like, considering they established that Hina and Sakura are so close, that as the audience, as the player, who didn't really interact with Sakura that much, I was able to tell that like the reason she killed herself was because she wanted to end the strife, that she valued the friendships she made so much that she was willing to sacrifice herself so that there would be the best chance of everyone else getting out alive by ending that internal conflict. I mean, she dies and she's got a freaking smile on her face. Like, she did it of her own will. She thought it was the best thing to do. And so Hina sabotaging the trial and trying to get everyone killed who Sakura sacrificed herself to save just kind of seemed like you're like shitting all over her last wishes. And once again, it's made more understandable when you consider the grief angle plus the fake suicide note. But I still think that Hina should have seen through that, considering how close they were. What else do we got written down here? Oh, one of the things that I did like about the case was I liked the kind of comedy of everyone kept convincing or admitting to killing Sakura at various points. Like, Hiro's like, I killed her, and then Toko's like, no, I killed her, and then Hina's like, actually, I killed her, and then I was like, it was fucking Tagami, dude. Partially as a joke, I did think it was a bit of a running joke after case number 2 to accuse Tagami of being the killer every single time, even though I legitimately kind of thought he was the killer in the first one, just because I wasn't convinced that the Leon thing was going to be like the smoking gun. Because I kind of already talked about this, but the localization makes that puzzle easier, or the lack of localization. Honestly, I don't know how you fix that puzzle to make it work for English audiences. Like, I feel like that's just kind of something that you just kind of have to sacrifice. Like, we can't really make this work easily. So that's not like a fault or anything. That's just one of the issues with localization. But yeah, like starting in case 3, I was just like, I would jokingly talk about Tagami being the killer at every time. Even though one of the things I did kind of, I don't think that they should have done this because of like the way they went with the Sakura suicide angle, but one of the things I kind of thought might happen in case 4 was that, or the pet theory that I liked, was that, well, there were 2. One was Sakura let Hina kill her so that Hina could get away. Like, it was a fake suicide. Like, it was actually Hina had poisoned Sakura, and then Sakura they were going to make it pretend, like, act like it was a suicide, and then Hina would be able to get out and be free. And then my other pet theory was that it was like Togami ordered Toko to poison Sakura, which would have been cool because you initially wouldn't suspect Toko, because you would think anytime she kills someone, it would be as Genocide Jack, and there's like a very specific way she murders people. So having Toko herself be the killer who wouldn't have those same restrictions Genocide Jack did, that would have been neat. I understand why they didn't go with that though, because they wanted to do the whole like Sakura sacrifice thing, which is important for like the completion of her character arc. Also, the other thing that I don't like about Hina sabotaging the trial is she never apologized after it was revealed that she was misled by the suicide note, and not apologizing to Makoto makes her a harlot. And because Makoto is a pure and innocent boy who should never be wronged. I guess also the other reason it pissed me off is that like right before the trial, we had just finished Hina's free time events. And so it felt like they had established that her and Makoto were friends. And we went out of our way to hide Sakura's secret because we didn't want to out her. Like, we did everything we could to be nice to Sakura, and then Hina just trying to freaking murder us along with everyone else. Did rub me the wrong way, but at the same time, that's more of just an issue with the fact that the game doesn't really acknowledge the free time events. Like, in the story itself. Like, you know, even though the free time events establish Hina and Makoto as being, like, pretty close friends, that's never really, that doesn't shine through in the story itself. So case number 5, this is probably the only one I actually have, like, well, the exception of the final case, which, oh god, I've got like 2 pages written on it, or 2 pages of bullet points. Case number 5 is not bad. I want to stress that it's not bad, but it's the only case that I think I kind of soured on after the fact. Like even the final case, which I was, you know, pretty vocally negative about, I've mellowed on it. Whereas case 5, I think I've actually kind of soured on. Like I didn't dislike it at the time, and I still don't dislike it, but I do like it less the more I've thought about it. The main reason is I felt like, also let me water up. I had to take a break after talking about case 5 because I'm already starting to get pretty uncomfortable sitting here. So not like it's not a bad case, but there's a huge missed opportunity, which I think I'll talk about that in a second. Actually, we'll kind of go through the trial blow by blow. The first thing that I hated was the whole Kyoko being a ghost thing. That tilted me off the face of the frickin' planet, dude. And honestly, the more I think about it, I almost wonder if that's meant to satirize the way that the first 20 minutes of each trial prior to that are kind of pointless. Like case 1, the whole thing with Makoto, where the audience obviously knows Makoto's not the killer, so you're kind of going through the motions there. Case 2, you know Toko's not the killer, so you're kind of going through the motions. Case 3, you know Hiro's not the killer, so you're going through the motions. Case 4, I don't remember it being as bad. Can't really remember what the initial thing was. It's like, it's the thing with Hiro, right? Where I think Hiro's the first one to confess. But at the same time, you're kind of like, well, no. Hiro can't kill Sakura. There's no way. Or like, you kind of have, you know that she died via poison. So like the initial causes of death they present with Sakura getting bashed upside the head. You're like, nah, that didn't kill her. Like, Sakura's too strong. You would do like 1 HP bar or 1 HP point of damage. So like I feel like the ghost thing was like kind of like a tongue-in-cheek joke about the previous trials, which does make me less mad about it, even though in the moment I was very vocally annoyed at wasting our time trying to prove that Kyoko was actually alive. So one of my problems in the moment that I don't have anymore was one of the things that, because after it was explained to me, is the whole time I was really confused why Byakuya was like not suspicious, because in the trial itself his alibi doesn't, like, it's just, he just says, I was in the garden, there was no body there, trust me bro. Apparently there's some other like additional dialogue, like that where Hiro will establish, like where he'll mention that Hiro was with him and Hiro backs him up or something. I don't know if that was like outside of the trial or what. But I did not experience that, so it kind of confused me the way that Byakuya was just seen as not being sus the entire time, because he's way more sus than Makoto, assuming his alibi is not concrete, because the way it's presented in the trial, right, his alibi is just his own word, and then him having access to Kyoko's room that entire time. And I also felt like him, like the way they end the trial, right, is they say something about like Makoto could have snuck the woodblock in when he was in there with Byakuya, which the fact that Byakuya didn't object to that, I felt like that was out of character, because you would really think that Byakuya would have been like, there's no fucking way Makoto's dumbass is sneaking anything past me. I'm the smartest man there is. Makoto's like a dumb little idiot boy. He can't do shit. Like, that's what I expected, but he's just like, oh yeah, Makoto, he probably did that. Like, what? You know, it's not like a huge issue just because apparently there is some dialogue that explains it. So it's not like a plot hole per se, but do have to knock it a little bit for not making that a little bit, like, not making that apparent in the trial itself. My major main issue, though, is with the end of the trial. Which is, so the trial kind of has this theme, which, to put it simply, the theme is like, trust your friends, right? As evidenced by the Kyoko bad ending. Where if you pursue the truth, and honestly, I don't even really consider it betraying for Kyoko, because at that point, Kyoko is not above suspicion. Like, Kyoko was always kind of like this very mysterious, sus character, who could have definitely been the mastermind, right? With the way that she kind of guides every single case. She's like, has all the answers and the evidence. Like, you could easily see that being like, well, Kyoko kind of helps solve the cases because it's more interesting that way. Because if Kyoko didn't intervene in like trial 1, Leon would have maybe not been revealed as the killer and the game would have ended instantly. So I kind of like, that was a thought I had to entertain, which is why I didn't consider exposing her lie as a betrayal. But the game obviously considers it a betrayal because you get a bad end and you have to witness the most cursed image of all time, which is Smiling Togami. What was I gonna? Yeah, so because of that, like that's like your theme of the trial, right? And so I felt like once it was clear the trial was abnormal, which by the end it like very much is, especially when Monokuma's like, the trial's over, you know, blah blah blah. Yep, it was Makoto who did it. Like, the rest of the gang should have realized that like shit was weird. And once the mastermind is breaking their own rules, there's no reason to participate in the game, because the only reason to participate is the idea that the mastermind won't just break their own rules at the end. Because really, the entire time, you have to operate under the idea that even if you win, right, like, you might just get killed as well, which is kind of what they wanted to do with the whole, like, you know, you were going to get sent outside the school and learn that it was a post-apocalyptic hellscape and then you get eaten by cannibals. Like, that's the kind of end goal of the trial, or of the killing game. And so once the mastermind has shown that they don't care about their own rules or they're willing to break them, you have no reason to participate anymore. So it felt like the gang should have stood behind Makoto and been like, hey, we have no evidence Makoto actually did it. It's just like some circumstantial stuff. The trial is obviously weird. The mastermind's doing some shady shit. If you're not going to be upfront and play by the rules, we have no reason to participate, and they should have boycotted the vote. And it could have been this like moment of solidarity between the final surviving students. Because really, one of my problems with the game is that for all the talk about friendship, everyone's mean to Makoto. And it felt too much like real school. Like, it didn't really feel like anyone was Makoto's friend, with the exception of, like, Kyoko. Like, I mean, you know, Togami and Toko, obviously they're not going to be very, like, they're not going to be very nice people. I understand that. And Togami does have the really nice line at the end, which kind of, I can't really remember the exact specifics, but when they're standing in front of the door, it's a nice little one-liner about how Makoto could maybe bother him for help if it's an emergency or something. But, like, even after they kill Makoto, nobody apologizes. No one's like, ah, shit, I'm sorry that we murdered you, Makoto, and sent you to live in the trash heap. Our bad. Like, there's nothing. They're just like, see ya. We're gonna go investigate on our own. We don't want to be around you, Makoto. You stink. Stinky. Go away. Like, it's not like a huge issue, I guess, but I do feel like that was a good moment to establish that kind of some bonds between the final surviving students, which would kind of set up the whole final case and final confrontation a little bit better. It would feel like everybody's kind of in this together. And I thought that would have been cool. But they don't really do that. Instead, they just kind of kill Makoto, and I don't like it. And everyone except Kyoko sucks. Kyoko and Sakura. They're the two I'll go ahead and spoil. Those are the top 2 on the power rankings. I won't say which one is number 1 and which one's number 2, but they're the most pure and best characters. But what else is there about chapter number 5? I think that's basically it. I just felt like there was a missed opportunity to establish some solidarity between the final surviving students. And honestly, I'm going to stop the recording here for a second and come back to talk about the final case, because I can't sit anymore. See y'all in a second. All right, so we're back. What we're gonna do? We're gonna talk about the final case. Oh boy, the Mac Daddy. Now we are officially entering into the hot take period of the video. I think case number 5 had a few hot takes in it, with my whole not really liking or thinking that instead of voting to kill Makoto, they should have been like, nah, dude, fuck you. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. Also, I did notice that we're apparently already at 35 minutes, so we're not doing this in under sub 40. We're also officially in black screen territory. Sorry I don't have more background footage. I kind of want to get this video out today, so I don't have enough time to record more background stuff. So, the final case. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I do want to preface it by saying I don't think the last case is bad. I just think that it did several things that I personally didn't like. These are, for the most part, not objective flaws, but things that I personally wasn't a huge fan of. And some of the things that I disliked, I could easily see how other people might like them. And also I think that my raw knee-jerk reactions made me come across as too negative. Or more negative than I actually am, or maybe even unfair towards the trial. I think that's just like the nature of that. I think it was partially because I had really built up the final case a lot. By the time we got to the final case, I actually had really high expectations. I think I kind of talked about this in the finale, but throughout the entire time I was playing it, I was kind of internally comparing it to the Zero Escape series. And I'm gonna try and keep things very indirect when talking about those games. If I do end up going into even like vague indirect spoilers, I'll probably have like a timestamp in the description. If in case people who are watching this haven't played those games or experienced them, which they really should, because if you liked Danganronpa at all, you will probably like Zero Escape, at least the first 2. Like I said in the beginning of the video, we don't talk about Zero Time Dilemma. It's not even that bad. It's just kind of fun to make fun of. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, because like essentially, those 2 games, so the first 2 games in the Zero Escape series, have incredible climaxes. And so in my mind, I was kind of like Danganronpa, especially I was comparing it to 999, where 999 kind of has big pacing issues, and I feel like Danganronpa has had really, really good pacing. And so I was kind of thinking that, like, if the whole game has been this solid, and if they have a conclusion on the same kind of tier as what you see in the Zero Escape games, then this could be like a truly incredible piece of storytelling. So I think I kind of built up my expectations a little too high, which is partially why I came across so negative, because I was a little exasperated because I had just too high expectations. That's on me. That's not the game's fault. So we'll kind of go by this blow by blow. We'll start with the actual investigation itself. I really enjoyed the investigation of this trial. I think there was some really, really great foreshadowing with the bodies in the morgue. Combined with the fact that there was some plausible deniability regarding there only being 9 bodies, because I think I mentioned this in the video, but like, you know, was a body actually missing, or was it just that Celeste's body wasn't in there? Because, you know, she was burnt to a crisp, so there really wouldn't be any remains to store in the morgue. So there was kind of some, like, is someone who is dead actually still alive, or is it just a, you know, a little bit of misdirection? So I thought that was neat. You know, kind of just had the really high hopes. because of that, because I just felt like things were building, and I had unreasonable expectations. So I think the trial starts off good. I think this is actually the only trial that starts off with like a good, like the first 20 minutes aren't completely pointless with the whole like picture stuff. Shout out to me spending 2 minutes trying to find Byakuya in his own picture. That was a pretty hilarious moment. I really thought I'd found something out too, and then to just realize that I was being a dumbass was that was probably my favorite part of all the trial videos, if I'm being honest. So the amnesia stuff, I have no qualms with it. My only problem was I do wish they I wouldn't say it was obvious, but I'm gonna say it's obvious just because of Hifumi's final words. I can't remember the exact specifics of what he says, but he very much alludes to the fact that everybody knew each other prior to the game starting. So amnesia was always a thing that I kind of suspected. The only reason I never really talked about it was just because I didn't know like how sci-fi-ish they were going to be getting. Because, I mean, obviously, you know, they never really explained the amnesia stuff, which I don't really have a problem with. I could definitely be like nitpicky about like, oh, how do they have how do they just manage to remove exactly 2 years of memories? Like, I don't, for the most part, like, I don't need a good explanation for things or even that detailed. I just need an explanation. That's part of the reason why the tragedy stuff rubbed me the wrong way. Like, even if it was like a lazy, there was like a coup and it started a destabilization of, this one big government and it spread from there. Like, I don't need an extremely detailed explanation, but the fact that there was nothing at all just kind of bothered me. Like, I'm pretty low maintenance when it comes to that stuff. This is kind of when we get into potential vague spoilers for the Zero Escape games. So if you haven't played those, then maybe just skip ahead like a minute. I'll try and remember to put like a timestamp or something. But essentially, there's a similar thing that happens in those games. And they don't provide the most detailed explanation, but they provide an explanation. And it felt better. Like, I felt like the writers had an idea. Maybe they didn't have enough time to go into it in that game right then there in the moment, but it felt like there was more going on. Whereas in Danganronpa, the whole like, it happened, but it's not important. Like, don't even bother talking about it. It just kind of felt like the writers themselves hadn't yet come up with the answer. So that's I think it's a minor criticism, but really my whole problem with the trial was it was just a bunch of minor stuff that compounded. Like, there isn't really anything super major that I like had a problem with. It's just like several smaller things that kind of built on top of each other. I liked how the report card info regarding Shunko was actually like, it helped me figure out that the dead body was supposed to be Junko, but Junko from the beginning, who's actually Mukuro, which, we'll talk about that in a second. I really liked that angle where what seems like kind of arbitrary information would have actually been important. And I kind of wish that it played a more direct role where they brought up the fact that the measurements, that Mukuro and Junko's measurements matched. But I guess it's also the report card info is something that's more like meta level that the characters in the game don't actually have access to. But I do think it would have been cool if that was more directly involved in the trial. So, like, the first real issue I had is I still don't really feel like... I'm trying to think how to phrase this. So Junko's body actually being Mukuro, I still maintain that it makes way more sense for Junko to have just been Junko at the start and that she was killed and her body was reused to fake Mukuro's death. Like Mukuro pretending to be Junko just didn't make sense to me because it complicates things. It unnecessarily complicates the whole plan, and it opens up the chance for the mastermind to be exposed. Like, Mukuro is mentioned to be a bad actor, which is kind of evidenced by the fact that at the start of the game, you know, when Makoto says something about how she looks different, she's a little awkward and defensive. And if like that were to persist, like you could easily see Mukuro like slipping up and exposing that she's not actually Junko, you know? Especially like if she like imagine if Mukuro hadn't attacked Monokuma at the start of the game. Like if she had lived longer, like it just felt like it was so easy for Mukuro to blow her cover that I don't know, it just felt like it was a twist for the sake of being a twist that doesn't actually make much logical sense in universe, like in the game itself. I like I also mentioned in the Monokuma thing, like I never really got the angle that Junko betrayed Mukuro and like purposely killed her, because Mukuro attacks Monokuma like of her own accord. Like maybe like because the audience, like we knew that she was going to be killed for doing that, because they'd already kind of established that rule that if you attack Monokuma, you're going to get punished. And, you know, I don't know if they exactly spell out that punishment is death, but it's a pretty easy assumption to make. So I don't know if that was, like, they never really mentioned this directly, but maybe it was supposed to be like a trick where Mukuro was told to do that, and then Junko killed her. Like, I don't really know. I think it's possible, but the game itself never makes that argument. So I never really got that. It didn't make much sense to me. Honestly, like, if you want to go deeper, like, really the whole sister angle with Mukuro and Junko, I don't think added... This is probably, like, my biggest criticism, like, the thing that I think is more of an objective problem as compared to some things that are just more like differences of like or different opinions on storytelling. I don't think Mukuro and Junko being sisters added anything to the game. I feel like the story plays out exactly the same if Junko was actually Junko at the start and Mukuro was the lone mastermind, like the way it's kind of initially presented. I feel like it makes more sense that way. And I don't think Mukuro, you know, who the person who you think is Mukuro is actually Junko and Junko being Mukuro. Like, it doesn't really do anything besides just make the game more confusing, which being confusing isn't a twist in my mind. Like, I don't know. I don't see what that accomplished besides just being wacky, I guess. Like, maybe I'm missing something, but I just don't really feel like the Junko Mukuro switch swap did anything. So the tragedy, this is like, it's another minor problem, like them not explaining the tragedy. I understand that. I mean, that's kind of a difference of opinion. Some people really like vague, ambiguous stuff that they can figure out for themselves. I do lean more on I like to have stuff explained and have a justification for. I don't need like a great justification or even one that's all that detailed, but I kind of feel like there should have been something more, considering the tragedy is the main impetus for the plot. Like, it's what the entire story revolves around. And so there not really being that much focus on it definitely rubbed me the wrong way. Like, not having any explanation just kind of, I think I mentioned this earlier, but it gave off the vibe that like the writers themselves hadn't really come up with the answer yet, which, I mean, maybe that's possible, maybe it's not, I don't know. And then I have written down like VLR is an example of this done right, I think, without getting into specifics of having an event and explaining it without explaining it, you know? Junko being evil for evil's sake was something that I think this is another just like personal, like it's not an objective flaw. It's just a difference in like what I like from storytelling. I just would have liked something deeper beyond Junko just being evil, LOL. Like she's evil for the lulz. Like she doesn't have to be a sympathetic character, because you can have a character be sympathetic or be unapologetically evil while also giving them some actual like reasonings and motives for their actions besides just being evil. For example, I mean, I'll go into a bit more spoilers here with this example just because it's Final Fantasy VI, which is like 30 years old, and if you haven't played it by now, you're not going to. So like Kefka from Final Fantasy VI is I think a good example of like this done well. And the reason I also mentioned is because I recently replayed the game when I let's played it. Like Kefka's whole thing is that, I mean, he's a monster. The game makes no excuses for him being a complete and total monster, but like his ideology is kind of fleshed out where he's essentially like a nihilist that doesn't believe human life has any value in and of itself, which is why he's kind of able to casually do all the cruel stuff he does. And to a degree, the game does that with Junko, but I guess one of my problems really, it's more just like that Junko's character is played up as a bit of a joke. Like she's not serious in the slightest. Which I think that to a degree that's just the style of the game itself. But I would have liked a bit more. I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Like she's got too much anime wackiness for me, if that makes any sense. As evidence, I mean, I think I mentioned that like her voice swapping was very obnoxious during the trial, especially some of the personalities were basically made me want to die. If I'm being completely honest. But I think that's more just like my own personal distaste for those character archetypes that she's portraying there. So, and I guess this kind of also feeds into her being evil for evil's sake. I kind of was expecting like a bigger explanation at the end. Like I thought maybe there was going to be something that recontextualized the entire game, like the whole killing game thing. Kind of go into spoilers for the indirect spoilers for the Zero Escape series again. So once again, haven't experienced those, please go do it. They're very good. But essentially those do something very similar, where in the end of 999 and Virtue's Last Reward, the whole game up to that point is recontextualized. And I was kind of hoping that Danganronpa would do that, and it wasn't just going to be that the mastermind's evil, which is what they went for, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I just would have liked something a little bit deeper, personally. Which kind of just feeds back into me having too high hopes for the climax, due to me internally comparing it to the Zero Escape series. And really, I guess that's pretty much everything I gotta say about the Final Class Trial. Oh my god, this video is so long. We're gonna quickly run through some power rankings here, or at least attempt to quickly run through. I think that's everything I really wanted to say. I don't know. I mean, if I feel like any of my points weren't clear, I can try and clarify them in like a comment or something if you have any specific questions. But I think that's pretty much all I got to say about the final case. Not bad per se. There's just a few things that I personally didn't like or would have liked to have seen done differently. Yeah. Overall, though, I mean, we'll save that for final thoughts. Character power rankings. Let's go. I'm excluding Junko, Mukuro, and Makoto because from the 16 students, because they don't really count. I mean, we could do Junko, but she would be at the bottom. Or Junko, both Junkos, both Mukuro Junko and Junko Junko would be at the bottom because they don't get any development at all. So we'll start at the bottom and go to the top. Number 13. I had to do it to him. It's Leon. It's not even necessarily any problems with Leon himself. He just dies too early. And they don't do anything with his character. He's just the first killer. It's not really a problem. Like, I don't have anything against Leon. Based on what little he was in the game, he seemed fine. but he just kind of, they don't really do anything with his character. And once again, also all of my character power rankings are based on having done no free time event, or just what free time events I did in the game itself. Some of these characters may be more or less likable depending on if I had done their free time events, but these are just based on what I played. So number 12, Hifumi, who all I've written is meh, which I think pretty much defines Hifumi's character. I think part of the reason why Hifumi is so low is that he's the dumbest character in the entire game, as evidenced by him choosing to be an accomplice with Celeste in Chapter 3. Just sheer stupidity. There's no real logical explanation for why he did that. Other than that, I mean, Hifumi's fine. He's like a good comedic relief character. I would have liked maybe something a little bit more done with him, but you know, he kind of dies mid-game and don't really do much with him. Number 11, Sayaka. All I have written is, how dare you betray Makoto, you harlot. So I think that pretty much sums up Sayaka's character. The reason Sayaka's a little bit higher than Leon and Hifumi is just because I liked the slight twist on her being, you know, initially she's the childhood friend archetype for Makoto. Or, I mean, they technically weren't friends, but you know, she kind of fills that archetype of being the sidekick character at first. And then her actually trying to murder someone and then frame Makoto for it definitely wins her some points on the power rankings just because it's interesting. And it's a nice little subversion of your expectations. So Sayaka, you know, not bad. Maybe should have picked someone besides Leon to murder, if I'm being honest. They don't really go into why she picks Leon, I don't think. Maybe it's just because, like, Leon's a little dumb and could be seduced. I don't really exactly know what the explanation is for why she picks Leon. Like, really, you should have picked Hifumi. Like, you could murder Hifumi, probably. Well, I don't know. How many? You probably have to stab him a lot. You know, he's got extra protection. He went a full vitality build when he was leveling his character. But yeah, so Sayaka, fine. Just a little on the low end, just due to dying so early into the game. Number 10, Toko. Part of the reason why Toko is so low on the list is just because she's alive the entire time and really doesn't get very much development. I just don't really have a strong opinion on Toko. She didn't leave much of an impact on me. She was kind of annoying, but the only really thing interesting about her is the Genocide Jack stuff, and even that isn't, like, there's not that much done with it. It felt like, at least in the main story itself. Maybe her free time events will flesh out her character more, but based on just the main story, I wasn't really a big fan of Toko. Number 9, Taka, the other T character. So he's like a good guy, good all-around dude. He does have a pretty early, or like a fairly early death, and he dies like midway through the game. The thing that gets him up a few rankings is that he had a bit of a character arc, but they never finish it. So he doesn't, like, I don't know, Taka, he felt like a bit of a waste. I kind of already talked about this earlier, but like, I feel like they could have either done something more with Taka or spent that time on another character. But as a whole, Taka's fine. No real complaints. Number 8, Mondo. Mondo would probably be a bit higher on the list, but he killed Chihiro, so he must burn. Even though the one thing that kind of gets Mondo a little bit extra points is that at least him killing Chihiro was not like premeditated. It was kind of like a crime of passion. But you don't blame him as much, or he's a little bit more sympathetic. Even though, I mean, obviously he's still a murderer, and that's not good. Don't kill people, kids. That's the message for today. I guess another thing is I kind of wanted to mention earlier. You know, despite the game being about kids murdering each other to get outside of the school, there's actually surprisingly few murders. Only Sayaka and Celeste and Hifumi are the only ones that actually do premeditated murders. Like, Sayaka tries to kill Leon, and then Leon does kill Sayaka, but even that was more of like a in the moment type thing, or not necessarily in the moment, but he didn't plan on killing Sayaka to get out ahead of time. It was just something he had the opportunity and he did it. He's still a bad dude, of course, but it's a little bit like surprisingly few characters actually played into the whole murder people to get outside. Because like Mondo kills Chihiro, but that's more of just a in the moment thing due to his own mental problems, like his own guilt over his brother dying. Celeste and Hifumi do maliciously murder people. Case number 4, Sakura kills herself. Case number 5, no one dies. And final case, nobody dies. So, honestly, very few real murders in the game, which I kind of thought was interesting when I thought about it some more. So number 7, to kind of keep moving things along because we're at a freaking hour, dude. Hiro, number 7. I like Hiro. He's a generally good dude, but the thing that loses him some points is he's alive the entire time. It's little to no development throughout the game, despite being one of the characters who lives the entire time. Like, he doesn't really have a character arc. And I got a little tired of him just being, like, the dumb character. Like, as evidenced by the whole Kyoko's a ghost thing that made me so mad. And I just feel like Hiro, like, you could honestly remove Hiro from the game and it accomplished, like, nothing changes. The only thing that changes is trial number 3, where, because Hiro's, like, the patsy for Celeste and Hifumi. Like, he's the scapegoat that they're gonna try and frame. But, like, that could have been anyone. There was no reason it had to be Hiro. But you could remove Hiro from the game and, like, nothing changes, in my mind. So number 6, Celeste. Celeste, I think, is the best villain overall. She had, like, the best overall plan, even though it did hinge on Hifumi being an absolute, complete, and total dumbass. Prior to her becoming evil, she's very active in the investigations. I feel like she kind of plays an active role, which felt better when she was actually the killer, or like when she's the killer in trial number 3. Because prior to that, I felt like she was acting in fairly good faith. So overall, I just like Celeste. I feel like she has a pretty well thought out plan. She manipulates Hifumi, then she murders his ass, and you know, she seems like the smartest of the evil characters, so to speak. Number 5, Hina. Hina was at one point, Hina was at the tippy top of the mountain next to Kyoko. She definitely lost some ratings due to trying to kill Makoto twice, which is not a huge fan of personally. She had some development, especially after Sakura died, but like her betraying Makoto after Makoto had been nothing but nice to Sakura in trial number 4 annoyed me, and then voting to kill Makoto in trial number 5 also annoyed me, and she never apologized. So it's really kind of rude, Hina. Really quite rude. Number 4, Chihiro, the most pure character next to Makoto, and the only character that managed to impact the game after their death. Well, Sakura kind of. Sakura and Chihiro are the only ones who managed to actually like do good shit from beyond the grave, which definitely gets them some extra points. Only real problem with Chihiro is just that they die a little early, you know. But for what they were in the game, they were a likable character who was just a good person. Number 3, Togami. You know, he's, as much as I like to joke about Togami and pretend to hate him, I like him. You know, he's got that classic Vegeta character arc where he's a complete and total asshole that becomes slightly less of an asshole throughout the game and is generally pretty helpful. He's mostly competent. He has a few moments of being a dumbass, like in chapter 2. His whole, like, I'm gonna pretend to be the killer so that I can reveal that Mondo was actually the killer. Not a very smart play, because why would we believe you when we think you're the killer? We could have very easily just been executed if it wasn't for Makoto and Kyoko being a little bit smarter than everybody else. But overall, I mean, I liked Togami. He was a fun and interesting character. I liked reading his dialogue. So he's good. He's a good dude in my mind. Or at least a good character. Not necessarily a good dude on a moral level, but he's aight. Number 2 and number 1. Now, I kind of already mentioned who these are going to be, and plus, you know, just by process of elimination, you can tell. It's a hard one. I feel like either one of these characters could easily be the best. I do have to say that number 2 is Sakura. She's got the best overall character arc with a nice redemption story with her, going from potentially wanting to help the mastermind to save her family to, valuing the friends that she made in Hope's Peak to the point that she's willing to potentially put her family in danger and also sacrifice herself. I do kind of wish that she had stayed alive to fight the mastermind with everyone. I feel like she could have done more good while being alive, even though I do understand her motivations for sacrificing herself. I do kind of feel like she caved a little bit because really it's just Tagami was being an asshole. Like, we could have just crushed Tagami's skull and then all the strife would be gone and we could have kept Sakura. I'm kind of joking there. So that means number 1, it's got to be Kyoko. It's a bit of a cop-out answer if I'm being honest, but she's the most useful, most competent, smartest character. She's got she's a little bit more interesting than just being the nice character because of her whole the fact that she's pretty sus. Up until she rescues Makoto in the trash heap, she's a fairly sus character. Just because of the way she kind of runs or directs all of the class trials, and she has all the answers and she's mysterious. So I kind of liked that, where you were never 100% sure if you could trust Kyoko. And she's really the only person that I felt like was actually Makoto's friend. So she definitely gets some extra points for that. Yeah, that's my thoughts on the character power rankings. With the exception of Makoto, Mukuro, and Junko. Makoto would be at the top because he's the most pure and innocent boy the world's ever seen, and everyone should respect him more. But we're not going to count him. The final thoughts. Let me water up. Oh my god, this video is so long. So my final thoughts. It's a good game. It's got a good story. It did some interesting things throughout, even though I was a little let down by the final case. I think some of that is just self-inflicted due to my own personal ways or personal preferences for storytelling, plus having too high expectations. Not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things. And one other thing I never really mentioned is that the reason it kind of bothered me a little bit more is that I place a lot of personal importance on endings. More than most people. To me, a good ending can basically redeem something that's not really all that great. So I just place a little bit more importance on endings, just because that's the thing that leaves that's your final impact, right? But as a whole, Danganronpa is very good. It's just the final act was a little bit of a personal letdown. Once again, I do want to stress, not objective. I don't think it's objectively bad or anything like that. I just would have liked to see things done a little bit differently. I am still really looking forward to playing the rest of the series. I was actually a little tempted to start playing the second game, right after finishing the Let's Play, but I kind of think I want to stretch it out a little bit. Don't want to get into fatigue with the series, per se. So it'll probably be about 2 months before we start Danganronpa 2. The plan is to do it after Pokemon finishes, which Pokemon will probably take 40 to 50 parts, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. Definitely in about 2 months, we'll probably start Danganronpa 2. I'm definitely looking forward to it. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much everything. Gosh, this video is almost an hour and 10 minutes long. That's crazy. I mean, that's a testament to the game being good. The fact that I can talk about it for an hour. So in that sense, that's a pretty ringing endorsement in my mind. So I think I'm gonna cut it off here. I'm gonna try and get this video out today, if possible. This video might be uploaded in a couple hours from me talking, so it's about as farm fresh as you can get. I'm Extra Cheesy 87. Stay tuned for the next Let's Play. And bye, guys.